1 at 2, source 3350, control still 570, box 3350, cabin 34, number 1 APU's 3850, number 2 source 3900, mixing chamber both about minus 43. Once more with Feel It.
Ring the alarm, ring the alarm, ring the alarm, ring the alarm. The fire flames are rising, no compromising. See the situation, reach the pinnacle. Hear the young people.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Kev. I just want to welcome y'all back to another episode of The Fire Alarm. Once again, I'm so grateful and thankful for everybody who's been tapping in. Won't you do me a favor? Go over to youtube.com, type in The Fire Alarm, and make sure you check out some of the videos, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I just want to remind everybody I'm not for division or drama, so be careful what you type because I do know what the delete button looks like. And that's my rhyme of the day. So check this out. I got a new episode coming up. I'm shooting this one live from Las Vegas, Nevada. So this is interesting. This is the first time I will be interviewing a host or a guest host, and I am remote doing this thing from the MGM Grand here in Las Vegas. So check out this episode. This is going to be an awesome one. Hope it blesses you. Welcome back. This is The Fire Alarm episode 3, and this is a special edition where I'm actually interviewing a former pastor. I'm excited for this interview. This is somebody I love so much. But before I introduce who he is, I just want to let you know that on episode 1, I told you guys about this Prime video called House of David that was going to be launched, and I started to watch it, and it's really been a blessing so far. And I feel like there's certain things that go right in line with the topic of the day. So first and foremost, on episode 1 of the House of David, there's obviously is when Saul begins to act crazy and stuff like that, but it took you back a little bit into some of the battles that he was fighting and defeating. And the seer, who was Samuel the seer, right, was telling him, prophesying what God was saying, giving him the word, and Saul was being obedient. And therefore, in his obedience, he was coming to victory in a lot of these battles. The final battle was against the Amalekites. The final battle before he went kind of crazy. And in this scene, Samuel got a word from God that when he defeated the Amalekites, not to take any of their goods, not to bring anything with them, just defeat them. Don't take over the land, nothing. Just come back, just defeat them. And what you started to see was a little bit of pride. You started to see a little bit of arrogance, and you started to see a lot of self-absorbance creep into Saul's heart, where he started saying I'm this mighty Saul, I'm this king, I'm the one who's defeating. And it's like he started to boast on it a little bit instead of giving the credit to God. So this was he kind of lost a form of worship that he had when Samuel anointed him. Samuel anointed Saul because there wasn't a king in for a lot of years. So when he anointed Saul, it was kind of I'm anointing you to rule over this. This is the direction I'm giving you. And now the way you're going to win, the way you're going to defeat territory, land, and stuff like that is by obedience. So as soon as Saul began to let this pride slip in and stuff like that, then that's when you saw the curse. Samuel told him that he was going to, get delusional, that he was going to go crazy in the mind and stuff like that. And then the story of David is beginning. So I just want to end it right there because I do believe in today's church, you do see men who are really called, right? You see men who really have sacrificed. You see men and women of God who prayed into their calling, who've been anointed for their calling, who have so many gifts in their calling. But somewhere along the line, the vision, the calling gets kind of distorted. And today I'm bringing in a friend of mine who was He's like a brother who actually has done some pastoring. He is a former pastor in Camden, New Jersey. He trailblazed and helped to launch a church plant out of Camden. He's the founder of Josiah Centeno Ministries and the School of Supernatural Ministries, which is focused on supernatural. He's a 3-time author. He's a full-time missionary and an evangelist. And more than any of that, you know, I could take all of these titles away, and me knowing him, I know him as a servant and I know him as a friend. So I bring him on today's show, and we are going to have some dialogue about this. So let me introduce to y'all my good friend, and Josiah Centeno. What's going on, bro?
What's going on, Kev? Fire alarm.
Yeah. So you heard a little bit of the intro, man. You heard a little bit about what God has been putting in my heart. You heard about what I was saying about the house of David and Saul and Samuel and stuff like that. So I do want to ask you a couple questions about your experience. So I'm going to give you the mic, and I just want you to just real briefly tell me a little bit of a testimony about how you went from being just a pastor's kid in North Philadelphia to pastoring. So show's yours.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it, Kev. And like you said, man, we have a long history personally. So you kind of see me through the evolving stages of like what God has done in my life before Christ, even though growing up in a Christian home, and how that kind of led to this point in my life. So you've been there for the journey, the good, bad, and the ugly. So for me, just so everyone can kind of get a basis of who I am, grew up in a Christian home. My father was a pastor, inner city Philly, did a lot of work with the Hispanic community, just the inner city community, a church that was like really focused on evangelism, missions, discipling people, seeing people from kind of like drug, alcohol, you know, all that background, prison time, to being restored. So the way I grew up, I saw my dad, you know, going into people's houses and discipling them and being out on the streets. And he would do anything to like gather people. He'd do magic, he'd do art. It was just this, you know, my dad was very focused on getting the gospel out, and, you know, true to pure religion, what the Bible talks about, taking in widows and orphans. We had people living with us, people who would live with us. Some people would steal from us. It was the reality of like what it really looks like to actually take care of people. So there's beautiful things about it. There was hard things about it, but growing up in it at that time, I had no desire for anything God. And the reason is what I perceived as my father and mother paying the cost. It's like they paid a cost that I didn't know what it meant, you know. I was just going along with it, you know, because they're leading our family, and then they're paying prices for, you know, with their time, with their life, with our home, our space. They're giving that, and then there's a lot of things that I experienced as number 6 in line, because I got a big family, that I was like, you know, my parents, my dad's there for other people who need him, but when I need him, he's not there. You know what I mean? So the way I translated that as a kid was, if God requires that from my dad and that makes my dad not available for me, then it's God's fault. You know what I mean? Like, he's the one telling him what to do. He's the boss. And if he's telling him to do that and it's negatively affecting me, then forget him. Like, I don't want anything to do with him, because all he does is take. And when he takes, it hurts. But then it's good for other people, but it's not good for me. You know what I mean? That tension, living in that, was really difficult. So growing up in that, like I said, there are beautiful things that I remember now in retrospect, but growing up in it, it was not like that. That was not my perspective. That's not my, like, what I felt about it in the moment. And that led me to be super rebellious, sexually active at a young age, being exposed to pornography and things like that, just living wild. When I was old enough to not be like mandatorily made to go to church, I stopped going. Didn't look back, didn't really want to go, had no desire, and just did everything that I wanted to do. Did music. You're part of that story. We did music, fooling around, never having a steady job, having a kid before marriage, all that stuff. And my life was the worst. Like, I remember being so dead inside. It just kept increasing. I was suicidal, social anxiety, diagnosed with depression, by therapists, you know what I mean? And that was all like in my high school years and leading up to that. The way that flipped, and you know this part of the story, is, my cousin, who I was really close to, he was shot and killed. He was murdered blocks away from where I was. And I had an experience that night where something was choking me. I was wide awake. Something was choking me. And I was like, what is going on? The next morning I woke up. My mom called me on a Sunday morning saying, your cousin was shot and killed. She didn't even say who, but I knew who it was. I started crying. I go into the bathroom and I'm like crying. And what I hear in my mind or whatever was, that could have been you. That was supposed to be you. And the reality of like what happened to me the previous day, what came to me was, that was the spirit of death, and it's that close to getting you too. Like, it hit him, but it was close enough. It's close enough to get you too. So I felt that the grip of death. I went to church that morning, nothing. It's just the only thing I knew to do. Like, you go through a bad thing, and like, who are you going to go to help? Everybody that I knew was in my world, and nobody's getting me out of that. So I went to church, my dad's church at that time, in the Feltonville area, around where I used to live. And I went, and I didn't feel nothing, man. I was dead inside. But that death was the wake up call that started me back in that direction.
Yeah.
And then from there, like your question was like, how did you get from that to pastoring? I didn't want to pastor. I saw, like I said in my story, pastoring meant suffering. I don't want that. I want to sign up for that. Pastoring meant giving up your time, your energy to people that are going to burn you.
Right.
Like, you give your life to them and they could flip and steal from your kids or hurt somebody or do something, grimy. And I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to do anything like that. I knew God had called me even from a young age. I always knew I was supposed to do something with my life, like important. But I always ran from that. So when I got saved, not too far after that moment, like going back to church, maybe a couple months, it was never in the plan for me to pastor. It was always, I'm never going to do that. So when I ended up pastoring, that was like something God had to call me into, and I had to accept it. Because you could hear God calling you for that, but you can reject it. I chose to accept it, knowing that two things: I wouldn't do it the same way, right? I saw how it was done, and that was really my push away, because the way my dad did it. You know what I mean? The imperfections and all of that. But that's the way he did it. That wasn't the way I was called to do it. If I was going to answer that call, it was going to be the way that God designed me to do it, and not the way I saw it done, kind of like in church culture, where, you get up, the being a pastor means you preach on Sundays and, you prepare sermons. Heck no. Like, I don't want that. That's, to me, even growing in Christ, it was about prayer, intimacy with God, the reality of going and spreading the gospel, like on mission, being on the streets, being in people's homes, being in prisons, being in rehabs, like going where people are, not waiting for someone to come to a church on a Sunday for 2 hours where you talk for half an hour and then you don't see anybody till another week. That's not pastoring. Like that's stupid. Like that's the ignorance that has plagued the church for too long, where it's more of like an occupation than it is a calling and a burden of the Lord to actually shepherd his people. So I'm pretty sure we're going to get into that, but that's kind of like in a nutshell from where I was at to me kind of stepping into it when God called me to it.
Yeah, that's good. That actually leads me right into my first question that I have with you, because I know, like you mentioned, that you felt like for a long time that you knew you were called, right? You knew that you had a calling on your life. You just didn't know what that looked like. But then as you go and you're in church and you are actually, following God, you are actually submitting yourself under leadership and what it looks like to be in church, to be saved from the world's standards, right?
Right.
You're in church. You kind of get a image of what church is supposed to look like now. And I can imagine you having this call in your life and you just being like, this is not really what I want to do. But then when you start getting confirmation and God starts speaking to you about, trailblazing a church and launching a church, I can imagine that some excitement has to brew up. I can imagine that some dreams have to stir up in your head of what it would look like for you to run a church, because now you have all this experience. You've seen family members pastor churches, fathers, brothers,
Right.
You've seen it. So now I can imagine that you've had your own image of what it would look like for Josiah Centeno to lead a church. So did you have any preconceived ideas of what it would look like, or what did pastoring look like to you?
Yeah. The way I saw it done. So for those who are like listening, the majority of what people have seen it, the way it's done, has been more tradition, not really what God created it to be. And that has hurt a lot of people. So for most people, they think church is where you go on a Sunday. For me, I'm grateful for the way I was brought up. This is part of the beautiful part, because to me, church wasn't a building. Church was a body of people, a group of people. And you treat a building differently than you treat a person, right? Someone living and breathing. And that's why Jesus used the language of like a body, a bride. Like you treat a bride a certain way, you treat a body a certain way, and you don't do messed up things to it. You know what I mean? You don't abuse it. So for me, the way I saw it done growing up with my parents, I saw like they went out of their way for people.
Right.
I wasn't, I knew church happened on a Sunday, but that was my least amount of interest growing up. What happened on a Sunday? I had no interest in that. You know what I mean? Yeah. It just wasn't. People sat down, stood up, sang songs, heard somebody talk, then left. That was not it, and that is not it. There are ingredients of that are God, preaching the word, worship and in song, discipling people, gathering. That is biblical. The way we've done it is corporate.
Right.
CEO, the world's way of doing things. That's not God's intention. So it's hard for a lot of people, because then we have to sort through the mess of it. But we're too busy trying to create something different instead of going back to the Bible and the way God created it to be. So the way I saw it was that I saw some beautiful things, discipling people, being in their homes. I saw that. When I got saved and I was being discipled in a church, there were elements of that too. And there were new things about it that were really helpful too. So praying for people, expressions in worship with like flags and dancing, like that exuberant stuff, that's biblical and that's important. Gathering together, same thing. Discipleship, evangelism on the streets, being in people's homes. This is something that I wasn't a part of in my dad's church, but it probably was there. But in being in a church, confronting people in love, like confronting their sin. I love that. Like for me as a new believer, not knowing how you really do this Christian thing, I needed that because I was being transformed. Like I'm born again, I'm a brand new person, but how do I live this thing out? I don't know. That's the point of discipleship. That's the point of what I learned. Confrontation, love, and discipling people. But then there was stuff that wasn't good. There were things that happened, decisions made, things that were never fully explained or understood, because when I was being pastored in that setting, that pastor was new and had to learn through things, right? And people are flawed, so they make mistakes as flawed people do while still being a believer. So there was a lot of things that I learned through the pain of it that I felt like were good too. So you talked about the things with King Saul, how he started on a good note and then drifted. Going through my own issues within the church helped me see that King Saul was a lesson, right? That I need to learn from. Even if I'm going through something similar, I need to learn to not go that route, right? So when I'm going through real leadership issues that are like that too, or similar or flawed, then what I can do is I'm like, okay, there's mercy for that and there's love in the interaction, but then I'm not going to do it that way. So I need to learn from the lesson. How do I live different? And I have to forgive, and I can't harbor bitterness, and I got to grow from that. So that helped me, that when I was pastoring, and like you said, the call to pastor is not like, because I'm not pastoring a congregation in Camden doesn't mean I'm not still shepherding God's people. It just looks different. And so it's not like something I can hang up. It's more like God called me to embody him in a specific attribute as a shepherd to his sheep. I'm a servant to his people. It's not my church. It's his church. They're not my people. They're his people. But it's so interwoven that I begin to learn how to love them the way Christ loves them. I learn how to be an overseer of people's souls while not trying to control them. And that takes a lot of humility. Takes, when pride gets in that, like it's yours and it's you, that's a recipe for disaster real quick. So what I learned through seeing flawed leaders and broken people still being entrusted by God to lead, I learned a lot of mercy. I learned a lot of patience. I learned how to not repeat mistakes, but also not like demonize people who are still in a work in progress too, the same way I am.
Yeah.
So the way I facilitated or led God's church was that it was never mine. This is somebody else's bride, somebody else's wife. And the way that I treat her, I'm not sleeping around with her. I'm not treating her like she's mine.
That's good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not touching her in places that are not mine to touch. And so the fear of the Lord guided me in that. Again, I know I didn't do it perfect, but perfection has never been the command. Purity is. And so being pure takes a lot of humility, a lot of repentance. Like I've had to repent to people. But then it also takes like a deep ownership of, I get to choose who I'm going to be. And that's my responsibility before the Lord. Like my ownership is not of God's people. My ownership is of my faith and how I express that. So I can do it with conviction and not live in compromise with God's, something that belongs to him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I apologize if you hear some banging going on in here. Like I hear it picking up a little bit in the mic. They must be doing some construction at the hotel. So, but that's good. Yeah. So I think that you have got an interesting insight on some of the mistakes that you don't want to make, right? Because you've seen some mistakes, like you stated. So, there are some ways, like I said, like there could have been signs of Saul starting to puff up himself, like starting to give himself the credit for some of God's victories, and people around him, I can imagine the people in his army who started hearing him say, yo, we did that and stuff, when
Right.
before his language used to be like, yo, God was with us through this, and we did, and God seen us through this. So there are some temptations that pastors fall into while attempting to grow the church. And when I say temptations, I mean like in areas like that, where they could start to fall in the areas of pride. They could start falling in the areas of like trying to do things on their own will when God gives them the direction. Because remember, disobedience is simple, right? Like even if God says, don't do something that seems good, the obedience is in not doing that thing, right? So
Right.
can you give us some examples or areas you may have compromised in or faced with compromising, or like some things that you were faced with compromising in order to grow your church? Like, or were there some things that like you knew if you did certain things a certain direction, your church would grow a lot, but you knew you needed to stay locked in and obedient?
Yeah, I think something that helped me, like, for me, I think I learned that I could be a Saul very easily.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, because Saul wasn't like in his story, like, oh, I'm gonna be a Saul. Like, he was Saul.
Right.
and unfortunately, because God lets us view things in totality and like very openly, God doesn't hide sin. He openly shows us what Saul did, and so we can learn from that. So for me, what I learned is like, it's not my church, so my methods of growing it don't matter. You know what I mean? Like, I'm responsible for the seed, and that's it. Like, I sow the seed. And there were times where I'm like, oh, you got to promote it. But the Lord, when I wanted to do that, like when I leaned into what I saw people doing that kind of made things kind of more visible, he would say, don't do that. So I wouldn't do it. Like, don't, flyers and this and that. He's like, don't. One of the things that I told God is like, God, I don't want to do this unless your glory goes. Like, I want this to be all you. I don't want or need credit for something that belongs to you. And I don't want that. Like, I really like, I shudder to think that any of it would be attributed to me. Like, that I'm spiritual or that I'm whatever. Like, I'm not. Like, I'm just obedient. Like, I just want to obey. That's all I want to do. And so some things that were very easy to lean into was like, promote it. We have beautiful things happening at our church. When we were stewarding that community in Camden, miracles were happening, healings were happening. Kids were praying for people, and people were being healed. We heard, and I'm saying this because I want people to get it. It's like, we heard angels singing audibly, like angels played instruments. And I had never experienced any of that before that. Like, the healings I have, but God was healing people. People were growing spiritually, being discipled. We had people in our house every Sunday. After we would have a corporate gathering, we would come to my house, we'd eat together. And that's really where the discipleship happened. I think some of the areas where I got really concerned and felt like I would mess up was when confronting people who were doing things that were spiritual but weren't biblical. Because again, there was a lot of new people. So, I had a young guy who I was discipling from back in Philly. He came over with me, and he has some integrity issues when it came to his relationships with women. And then he started doing like some home gatherings and praying with this very new family, a woman who just got like delivered and saved, walking with Jesus with her kids, single mom, and just got reconciled with her husband who was gone for like 3.5 years. Like, they got reconciled, God was doing something. And this kid was going in their houses when they needed to be building their marriage up and their family being restored. He was trying to do spiritual stuff and kind of be influential in their lives. And so I said, hey, there's nothing wrong with meeting with people, but you're doing something that is not essential for right now in their lives. Like, you're not shepherding their lives. Like, their soul is not on you. So I was actually debating whether I should confront it or not, or leave it alone. And the Lord was like, you need to confront it, and confront it biblically. So I actually had to go to somebody's house, confront the issue. I got rebuked by a person that was there. And then the people that I was trying to help in that moment, they ended up leaving the church after that. And then the kid I was discipling, he ended up leaving eventually too. You got to remember that people are young, and what you're doing is as important as what they need. You know what I mean? If your gift is evangelist and they're saved, you don't need to keep doing a bunch of stuff to save their soul. They're saved. They need to be discipled. And if you're not going to disciple them to Christ, but disciple them to yourself, which what he was doing, there was a lot of arrogance and pride on his part. And I was trying to help him do that. I was pointing out blind spots. But he didn't do it. So it was hard for me to not control, is what I'm getting at. Like, I had to fight not trying to like demonize him, because he was a good kid, but he was doing things out of order. And the way I saw that done before in the church I was at before that, in the community, was if you're doing things that I don't trust you in, then what I do is I remove you from ministry.
Wow.
I talk about you behind your back to my leaders. I tell them to watch out for you. I was treated in a wrong way, in a way that wasn't godly. And I was part of leadership. So I didn't want to do that, but I can feel myself when that was happening, wanting to do that.
Right.
Wanting to control, wanting to like make sure people stayed away from this person and treat them like an outcast. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, because I saw that that wasn't biblical. But it's very easy to do it. You know what I mean? Especially when you're wanting to protect people, I think is the primary core value of like why people go astray. They want to protect, but they do it their way, not God's way.
Right.
And then if there's pride in it, then they spiritualize it and say, well, I'm the leader. This is, I'm the set man or woman, and you do what I say, and all that stuff. It becomes manipulative and controlling, which I have experienced. But I could feel it, like Kev, I could feel it bubble up in me to want to do it. And because I learned through the pain of those lessons, through Saul, through my own experiences, I had to fight that thing through being a repeat offender of that. So that was extremely hard. And that happened multiple times where I had to fight the thing to control it, to protect. Like, I could spiritualize it, but it wouldn't be biblical and it wouldn't be healthy. And that meant more to me, because it belongs to God and not me, that I keep what his thing pure, rather than my thing being successful or growing and thriving the way I feel success should.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, man. And I like the way you, I like that realization that you got, man. That's real. I think that this is going to be real helpful to a lot of young pastors out there, especially ones who are starting to grow a church. I always say that we need to normalize these real conversations, and we need to normalize confrontation, because confrontation builds character. I'm going to go on a quick break. We'll be right back. I got a couple more questions to ask you.
Got to the top.